Welcome back to the Derek Smith Spiel for another weekly update. This is March 24th through 31st. Starting it out in the UFC, there was a fight night with the main event featuring Brandon Moreno and Steve Erceg. But before the main event, Paul Rosas Jr. defeated Vince Morales by unanimous decision, and he continues his climb up the contender list. Paul Rosas Jr. is an extremely young fighter, a very exciting fighter to watch. The fact that he's having such an impact fighting against fully developed men. He came into the UFC at age 19, youngest in history, and it's been a very slow climb for him. That's not bad. That's not a bad idea at all. Most people in the UFC, they have had 20 amateur fights before they get in there. Paul Rosas Jr. has not had 20 amateur fights. He's not had very many at all. So it's very smart how they're dealing with Paul Rosas Jr. because he can be an extreme force later in his career as long as they take their time and let him develop and learn in the cage. And that's what he's been doing. Very impressed with Paul Rosas Jr. Stay patient with him. Later in the main event, Brandon Moreno defeated Steve Erceg by unanimous decision, winning 4 rounds to Steve Erceg's 1. Steve Erceg has now lost 3 fights in a row to Alexander Pantoja, Kai Kara France, and Brandon Moreno. No shame at all in those 3 losses. None. None at all. Those are 3 very legit fighters. The 3 people who have been competing for the belt in the division for as long as I can remember. It's very frustrating for Steve Erceg right now. Losing 3 fights, even though it's 2 amazing fighters, losing 3 fights in a row is not a good sign in the UFC when you're fighting for contracts. A sense of urgency may be kicking in for Erceg, but you just gotta hope that he realizes he's an amazing fighter and he's just gotta stick to his stuff. All the hype, all the praise, all the success, that doesn't come from nothing. He's got to stay confident and just get his feet back under him. Into the MLB. The MLB season has officially started. It is opening weekend. And here are my way too early predictions for the MLB season. The American League MVP, it is going to be Stephen Kwan. Stephen Kwan batted .292 last year and only heated up in the playoffs. He hit another level in the playoffs and was a huge part of the Guardians being so successful and making it as far as they did. He's also phenomenal in the field. He's an extremely underrated player. I don't think he can be underrated 2 years in a row. He's as important to the Cleveland Guardians as Jose Ramirez is. I predict that he will stay hot, stay consistent, and he'll be more recognized and available to win the American League MVP. The National League MVP, I believe that will go to Ronald Acuna Jr. Ronald Acuna Jr. coming off injury, you don't really know how he's going to look. If he comes back with the same confidence, a little bit more conservative, or not conservative, but smart, like realizing the risk to reward ratio before he just goes for it. If he comes back and becomes even equal to the player he was before injury, I believe wholeheartedly he can win the MVP. American League Cy Young, I'm going to give it to the Astros ace Framber Valdez. And the National League Cy Young, I'm going to give that to the Phillies pitcher Zach Wheeler. Last but not least, the World Series champions. Unfortunately, I believe in this one wholehearted. This isn't a stretch or any hope. I think the Dodgers are going to win it again. When you look at their lineup, there's no holes at all. None. They've truly got an all-star team as their MLB team. When you look at just the amount of athletes and contenders, there's their whole lineup could win National League MVP. That's how good they are. Their starting pitchers are phenomenal. By the time you get to their bullpen, it doesn't even feel like you've gotten there, because usually once you get the starter out of the game, that's when offenses heat up. Not with the Dodgers bullpen. It's phenomenal. Their whole lineup from top to bottom is amazing. And you'd expect that when you have the amount of money that the Dodgers have to spend, but that's just the reality of it. The Dodgers are a full, complete team, and I would not be shocked to see them win the World Series. I wouldn't mind seeing an upset. I wouldn't mind seeing someone take out the Dodgers, but right now they are the team to beat. But those were all my speculations. Here's a real stat for you. The Yankees set their franchise record for most home runs in a game with 9 when they defeated the Brewers 20-9. 3 home runs came off the bat of Aaron Judge. Now, people are already speculating that the reason the Yankees are hitting so well, even though there haven't been many games played, they're saying the reason the Yankees are hitting so well is because they have redesigned their bats. And none of this is illegal. Basically, the sweet spot of your bat, or the thickest part of your bat, the MLB rule states that the sweet spot needs to be, I don't remember the exact number, but around 2.9 inches. So what the Yankees did is they looked into where their hitters made the most contact. This is all individual. So, for example, they looked at Jazz Chisholm. Let's say Jazz Chisholm makes contact more in towards his hands than the average MLB player. All they did is they moved his sweet spot in towards his hands. That way he doesn't have to change his swing or try and experiment with his timing or anything. He just has to keep the same swing, and he'll hit the sweet spot of the bat, resulting in higher contact. That's all the Yankees are doing. They're moving the sweet spot of their bat, and it does look like it's working. Again, it's super early in the season, but a phenomenal idea. Now into the NFL. Trevor Lawrence remains the second highest paid player in NFL history. That was just a crazy stat. Also, the 8 highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL have a combined 0 Super Bowl wins. Those 8 quarterbacks are Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, and Lamar Jackson. So really, when you look at it, other than maybe Trevor Lawrence and Dak Prescott, there's no one who doesn't deserve to be in that list. Those are all phenomenal quarterbacks. But it just shows the amount of money that teams are willing to invest in a quarterback, and the amount of money they really gamble because they say this is the guy who's going to bring us a championship. This week there was even more talk about rule changes in the NFL. One of them, the NFL is thinking of changing the first score rule in overtime, because of the fact that 12 out of 16 teams that won the coin toss in overtime and chose to receive won the overtime game. Their solution to this is they are thinking of making an overtime quarter. Instead of the first team to score, they're just making a 15-minute quarter and just going to let it play out and see who comes out on top. I like that idea. That's pretty much how every other sport does it. And I like it. There's more time management. There's like a whole new strategy to it. The biggest thing for me is don't let games end in a tie. It is so frustrating to me, this is just more of like a pet peeve thing, but I think it's stupid that NFL games can end in a tie. Look at just about any other sport. There aren't very many that end in a tie, and ties mess up they mess up seeding, they mess up division champions. It makes things so much more confusing because you don't know how to count a tie. It isn't a win, but it isn't a loss, so it's basically like that game doesn't exist, really. It's get rid of the ties. That would be my only complaint with the NFL overtime rule is the fact that you can end in a tie until you get to the postseason. But another NFL rule change they're considering is virtual measurements for first downs. This one was, living in Buffalo, this was a huge topic because of the fact that the Bills lost on a quote-unquote controversial spotting against the Chiefs. My response to that whenever I hear Bills fans complain about it is maybe don't QB sneak it 8 times. Or if you do, run it to the other side of the offensive line. Or maybe make more than an inch. Make it less. There's so many things that could have been done differently. I do think that there are ways you can make spotting more accurate. It's a little frustrating that this subject came up around a tush push, which is another controversial play. And the fact that the tush push didn't work, which I kind of chuckle about. Josh Sweat, he is officially an Arizona Cardinal. He had 8 sacks with the Eagles last year. The Cardinals looking for him to make a difference on their defensive line. Talanoa Hufanga, he was signed by the Broncos. And Russell Wilson was signed by the New York Giants on Tuesday night. Russell is a 10-time Pro Bowler, and last year finished with 2,482 yards and 16 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Those numbers do not jump off a page, and mostly because, to be frank, they're subpar. In the 70s, it might have been good to have about 2,500 passing yards, but not in this day and age. It wasn't an inefficient year. It wasn't necessarily a sloppy year, but when you look at just the overall productivity, he did not do phenomenal with the Steelers, but he didn't do terrible, and for the most part, he won. Had he not lost the last 5 games of the season and made a first-round exit in the playoffs, it would have been a totally different narrative around Russell Wilson. But where he is right now is there's a lack of productivity, and he didn't win when it mattered. That's a little harsh. Russell Wilson's still a decent quarterback. He's not what he used to be with the Seahawks and the Legions of Boom, but he's still a good quarterback. As far as what he can do on New York, unfortunately, close to nothing. I'd expect a similar stat line to what he had with the Steelers when you just look at what he's surrounded with in New York. But it will be an interesting dynamic to watch between Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. That might be an interesting quarterback race. Even though Russell Wilson will probably get the starting job, if Russell Wilson struggles, I bet they'll throw Jameis Winston in. And both of those two guys, between Broncos country Let's Ride and blind Jameis Winston, it'll be entertainment from New York, which will be more than they've done on the football field. But the biggest addition this week was the Patriots signed Stefon Diggs to a 3-year, $69 million deal. What I'm wondering is, why did Diggs go to the Patriots? I'm sure it's not only what I'm wondering, but what a bunch of people are wondering. He left Houston, which when healthy are set up to make a deep playoff run, and it's not unrealistic to say they could make it to the Super Bowl. He left Houston for the Patriots, who have been in rebuild for the past few years. Really, ever since Tom Brady left, they've been in rebuild. So why did Diggs go to the Patriots? First of all, he's offered $69 million. So obviously that's a huge factor, just the money. But second of all, just look at the trend in his past 3 teams. He was on the Vikings, and he was wide receiver 2 behind Adam Thielen. And he had problems with the Vikings, and then he left to the Bills, where he was going to be the number 1 guy. Then he was the number 1 guy on the Bills, and he just caused problems. He was, I can't remember the specifics, but he was toxic. Toxic's the only way to describe it. Then the Bills let him go to Houston, And in his defense, CJ Stroud said he had no problems and he was a great captain. But he was wide receiver 2 behind Nico Collins when he was healthy at the Texans. And now he's on the Patriots, where there is no doubt that he will be the number 1 guy. The Patriots had the 28th ranked wide receiver core last year, and they have not had a 1,000-yard receiver since Julian Edelman in 2019. So really, what it boils down to is Stephon Diggs is a prima donna. He needs to be the guy, and what better place for him to be the guy than in New England? He can go over there and say whatever he wants, but no one can do anything because he's the only thing keeping their offense afloat. As far as how the Patriots will play, he is a huge addition, but there's still a lot of questions due to the fact that he is 31 years old and coming off an ACL surgery. So a lot of questions, but Stephon Diggs undoubtedly will help the Patriots. Don't expect a huge difference on offense, though. Definitely don't expect that. Players to watch out for who are still free agents. Amari Cooper, he was a free agent, not re-signed by the Buffalo Bills. Again, on the older side, but he's a crafty veteran. He could help develop younger wide receivers. He's got reliable hands. He would be a valuable asset for a team. Aaron Rodgers, he's now most likely to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers now that Russell Wilson is out. But just keep an eye on Aaron Rodgers. You never know what that guy's going to do. Then Justin Simmons and Keenan Allen are also still free agents, so keep your eyes out for that. But that is all for this week's weekly update. That is March 24th through 31st. Thanks for tuning in. This episode was brought to you by yours truly, Derek Smith, with help from the voice memos and Spotify Podcasters app. For more content like this, you can continue listening to the Derek Smith Spiel on Spotify, or you can listen on my YouTube channel at Derek Smith Stock 13. There you'll find my podcast and sports betting videos on top of that. If you're a fan of my sports betting videos, you can also see highlights of those on my TikTok account. You can find that by searching at SmithStock5 again on TikTok. Enjoy collecting cards? If so, check out my Collects account at Derek Smith Stock to get deals on quality cards. For updates on everything I mentioned, follow my Instagram account. You can find that by searching Derek Smith Stock 13 on Instagram. Not interested in sports? Then go to YouTube and watch Dylan Smith Outdoors YouTube channel. Search Dylan Smith Outdoors, where there are plenty of outdoor content videos, including hunting, catching, trail cam and tree stand setup, cooking, and plenty of laughs in between. Need your lawn sprayed? Whether it's weeds or insects, Greenwood Ecologics has you covered. If you need help making your lawn greener than your neighbors, call Greenwood Ecologics at 585-739-1610. I repeat, 585-739-1610. Finally, thank you for listening to this production of the Derek Smith Spiel. Every view or listener is appreciated. I'll catch you later.